Welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm your host, Matt Volz, joined by Jack Hoadley to talk some NBA basketball. Hopefully you can hear us now. We were doing our best silent movie impression earlier, so that was all. It was all intentionally done, by the way.
What are you talking about? We're talking basketball for the first time tonight.
That is correct.
This is the
first time.
We've definitely not gone over this already.
That's correct. We're talking about this for the very first time only. So, in the NBA, a big flurry of deals made a couple weeks after the trade deadline, and obviously the major one we talked Luka Doncic going from Dallas to the Lakers, and we mentioned earlier, we talked about before the show, that the move seems almost like you're trying to get a top player to a top market, kind of like how in baseball you've seen a lot of people frustrated that a lot of top players are going to the Dodgers.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's even a parallel with the LA team being the one that they're going to. I believe that this trade is like, you can't even make up an equivalent for it, but it'd be like if you traded Josh Allen for like TJ Watt or Shohei Ohtani for Mookie Betts, Juan Soto for Mookie Betts. It doesn't make a lot of sense on paper. If you're trying to win now, then are you, because you still got the worst player? I can't believe that Luka Doncic was traded for Anthony Davis. It's going to be a hard season to watch for sure, but there was other deals that happened, such as De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs, which I think has made them a lot better as of late. We'll have to see how well they do. Actually, Wembanyama got caught cheating during the skills competition at the All-Star game, which we can touch on later. But yeah, and then you have Jimmy Butler to the Warriors, which I think is going to make them a heck of a lot better. That's two of the best playoff performers of the past 5 years right there. So I think that'll make them a lot better going down the stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. You have these big deals that happen. And I'd mentioned that really for the Warriors, even though they are obviously not the team they were a decade ago, but they're still a team that, as long as they've got Curry, now they've added Jimmy Butler, they're going to be competitive. And they're going to be a team that's going to be in the playoffs and could be a force to be reckoned with come playoff time. Now, Jack, pivoting our discussion off of the trade deadline, we wanted to talk about the All-Star game because it kind of got a lot of negative reviews from a lot of basketball fans.
A lot of fans were saying that they believed that this format was kind of better and that it took away from the lack of effort from the players. I, on the other hand, completely disagreed. I thought that it wasn't really like that at all. I kind of found it boring, especially when there was only about 30 minutes total of basketball played between the entire 3-hour broadcast on Sunday night. I find that a little bit ridiculous, and I find that while the players may be trying a little harder, it's just not solving anything. And you have Draymond Green on TV, invited by TNT to talk about the All-Star game, and he is just demolishing it in front of everybody, which I thought was hilarious. Probably the best part of the weekend, other than Mac McClung jumping over a car.
Yeah, that was really cool. That was probably, I would say, the highlight of the All-Star weekend in the NBA.
The dunk contest is back, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I think that Mac McClung could win it for the next 6 years, and I'd still be okay with it, because that is the only thing that's keeping this weekend as like something good. And apparently Mr. Beast, too. He was also there. So.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA, they got to find something. I mean, there's talk across a lot of sports leagues. We'll talk more about it later, but the NHL, of course, they got rid of their All-Star game and their All-Star skills competition and all that and created the Four Nations Face-Off as a result, which we'll talk more about later when Jenna joins me. But a lot of discussion has been centered around the All-Star game. You think about the NFL and the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl, of course, now being a flag football game, a lot of people hardly even watch the game anymore. At least for me personally, Jack. I mean, the only thing I watch is the skills competition. I like watching the dodgeball game. The dodgeball game is fun. But really, besides that, the Pro Bowl is not what it used to be. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the NBA All-Star Weekend is quite... Actually, you know what? Maybe I'd have the Pro Bowl over this All-Star Weekend format. I think that baseball is still in a good spot. The Home Run Derby is fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if the NHL was doing particularly bad, but this Four Nations Face-Off is like must-watch television.
Yes.
I don't know where you are Thursday night, but if you aren't watching Team USA face Canada, then you are missing out. because that's going to be electric. But yeah, I think that All-Star weekends are kind of outdated. I think that it's kind of like losing its touch a little bit with the modern fans. And I think that the NBA has to do something quick, maybe a USA versus the world game over the weekend, or just give the players a week off.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything like that. I know that it's been talked about for years, the lack of defense in the All-Star game, sort of the lack of effort in the All-Star game. And that's not a problem that's exclusive to the NBA either, but you make a good point that really things may need to change with the way they do their All-Star format. At least they don't do it how Major League Baseball used to do their All-Star game, when the winning team would get home field advantage in the World Series, if you can remember back to that crazy era. I mean, at least it's not to that level, but still, there's something the NBA's got to figure out with their All-Star weekend.
Hey, if it lets me get the best players in the league playing at their best of the ability, I don't see why not. I think it'd be funny to watch. I think it seems like a lot of stakes for a weekend that's not supposed to be about that, but
yeah.
I don't know. It could be an interesting watch, especially with how series work in both of those leagues. I think that Damian Lillard had a good take on it all. He said to bring that back or just try to do something new, because what they're trying to do right now is clearly not working.
Yeah, absolutely. So past the All-Star weekend, of course, the NBA season, just a few more months left. You also wanted to talk about the MVP debate around the NBA. Of course, we like talking about MVPs around here, considering the fact that our quarterback was one, which was kind of cool. Now, that's not fair. So give us your thoughts on the NBA MVP debate.
I think that the NBA MVP debate has the possibility to be worse than the NFL one right now. Because, listen, at least Josh Allen deserved that award. He sat out, 12 quarters this year. He definitely, I think if you watch him play, you could say that he's probably playing better football than Lamar. Nikola Jokic is averaging 30 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists a game, and he's second in the ladder behind a guy who shoots 15 free throws a game. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that Nikola Jokic is not going to win. He should probably have 4 straight MVPs right now, but his, I believe, second straight and 4th total MVP. I think it's ridiculous that he's not winning that award. I think that Shea winning that award right now is really, really bad for the NBA, because it shows that there's just voters fatigue going on, kind of like what happened in the NFL this year. But
that's an excellent point you bring up about voter fatigue, and that's a lot of people thought that was why Josh Allen won it over Lamar Jackson. But yeah, I mean, Nikola Jokic he's the type of player who, the Nuggets obviously won the championship a couple of years ago, and they had some good supporting pieces for him. He is a player who absolutely can take over a game single-handedly, and that's what you want from your MVP. I mean, obviously, yes, Shea is a terrific player. That's true. But you get a player who can, not that Shea can't take over a game single-handedly, but you get someone who's that dominant in the paint like Jokic is, there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. And just to give Shea a case here, they're the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. He's the best player on that number 1 seed. And they are probably a significantly better defensive team, I'd say, than Jokic's Nuggets. But right now, Jokic's second best player is Jamal Murray. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably has 2 to 3 players that are better than Jamal Murray right now, which I think that is a similar case to what you could say in other MVP debates. I don't think that you can judge wins a lot on one player, which is why I certainly think that Nikola Jokic deserves this award right now. Especially the Nuggets went into the All-Star break white hot. They are 8-2, I believe, in their last 10, winners of 8 straight.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with you about wins not being an individual stat. There's so much more that goes into winning games. Now, you have your players who, quote unquote, are great winners of the game, and that's absolutely true. But there's something to be said for basketball being a team sport like anything else. It's no different from anything about football or hockey. Yeah, if you have one amazing all-world player, you're probably going to win a lot of games, but you may not be the best team with one individual player.
Absolutely. I don't think that one player accounts for 50 wins out of an 82-game season. You've seen both Jokic and Shea put up absolute duds this season. don't think it's ridiculous to say that by any means, but it's more about the fact that not only is Nikola Jokic doing this, he's doing it on less free throw attempts and he's doing it way more efficiently. He's shooting 58% from the field, which is unheard of when you're averaging 30 points per game. So I think that MVP race should be a lot farther apart than it is.
Yeah, Nikola Jokic, he's the type of player who really can kind of do a lot of different things. I mean,
Jokic likes his bagels, but he plays good. He plays really good ball when he has to, and that's all that matters. I mean, he's not Zion. He's not sitting out every other game. He played most of the season.
Yeah.
He's played at a very high level, without a doubt, the best player in the NBA right now. I don't think it's horrible to say that. Maybe Luka Doncic was up there, but not to me anymore.
Well, apparently his conditioning was not was not quite good enough. So
no more bagels.
That's why
no more millions of dollars.
It's just that deal will still, again, as a fan of, I'm a fan of an Eastern Conference team. I'm a New York Knicks fan, and when I saw that trade, I thought it was fake. I mean, I genuinely, I looked at my phone and I got the notification for the trade, and I said, there's no way this is real. And then I saw it pop up on TSN and ESPN, and I said, holy cow, this is a real trade. And it still doesn't make sense to me. It's the same energy to me that people who say, what's that? There's like that kind of bread, you know what I'm talking about, Jack, totally random, but like, it's really kind of thick. And people, I've heard people say it's their favorite type of bread. And it makes zero, pumpernickel, that's where I'm going.
Yes.
That's where I'm going.
Yes.
It's pumpernickel, yes. And I've heard people say it's their favorite kind of bread. Total side tangent. But in that same vein, it just made no sense. And I probably make no sense either. And I'm
not a bit.
I'm going to credit lack of sleep and it being a Tuesday night for that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you want some bread after this, you should certainly go venture that. But what I was gonna add on more to it is just the fact that even the Mavs owner, I believe it was last week, he had a quote saying that players like Shaquille O'Neal had the work ethic that you were looking for. Are we serious? Are we seriously saying that Shaquille O'Neal has that work ethic that Luka Doncic just flat out doesn't? I mean, trading a player who has not even really hit their stride or their prime yet he's already brought you to the finals, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's the first time two first-team All-NBA players have been traded for each other. It's just ridiculous. I can't believe that this trade has even happened, but it is the reality that we are in, and I do think that the Mavericks still have a really good chance to go and win it all if they had a center that was healthy on the roster right now, because unfortunately, Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, and Anthony Davis are all out for significant time.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you're trading away a top-tier player, you might not want to acquire a player who has serious injury concerns, which Anthony Davis does. And it's just, you had fans getting kicked out of the games for booing the general manager. It's a
horrible season to be a Mavericks fan.
It is, but like you said, Jack, still definitely a good team. Well, thanks for joining me on this segment, Jack.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Twice for joining me on this segment, Jack. We'll be back to talk some NASCAR Daytona 500 last weekend. We'll talk hockey and lacrosse. I'm Matt Volz, and you're watching Sports Hour on WNYF.
This one's for the real ballers and shot callers, the Sisterhood of Women in Tech. They're discovering cures, building apps, and programming the blockchain. They're CEOs, worldwide hustlers who can make it rain. They're tearing down the old boys club and seeing big gains. Because when women in tech come together, you know they make that change.
Every day,
millions of people are connecting.
And even though we're overcoming obstacles,
watching each other's backs,
and banding together,
we should still make an effort.
To get to know each other
on a deeper level.
Father,
cosplayer,
mentor,
actor.
It's time we take a step forward.
Come together
and discover
how accepting our differences
can make us stronger.
How prepared is your family if a hurricane shows up at your doorstep, or a flood, or a blizzard? You can't just turn away a natural disaster. That's why it's important to go to ready.gov/plan now. It has the tools and tips you need to make an emergency plan with your family. So if disaster comes knocking,
let's go.
You'll be ready to help keep your family safe.
It's just a pizza.
Yes!
Make a plan today.
Most of my family, they never graduated high school or even let alone go to college, so I'm trying to break that barrier. Every day after work, went straight to school, studied hard, and it paid off. I could not have done it alone. I see the future is really bright for me. The high school diploma is just added to the confidence, and now I feel unstoppable.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm now joined by Brock Papke, and we're going to talk about the beginning of the NASCAR season with the Great American Race, the Daytona 500 on Sunday. William Byron taking home his second consecutive Daytona 500 win and the second of his career. So, Brock, your thoughts on Sunday's race?
Wow, it was an intense race. There was even a rain delay that caused like a bunch of stuff. But I'm really I'm proud about the entire premise of, you know, the amount of crashes that happened throughout the entire thing. You want to get into that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for full disclosure, I told Brock before the show, out of the 200 laps in the Daytona 500, I watched 4 of them. I caught the first 2 laps, and then I was busy doing something else, and then they were in a lengthy rain delay, and I was in charge of hosting an event on Sunday, so I missed the majority of the rest of the race as well, but I got back in time to catch the final 2 laps, and the race is finished. But it's interesting to me, there was a lot of really tight pack racing, a lot of 3-wide action very early on in the race, a lot of really tight, close together, trying to work that draft, and a handful of really tough-looking crashes for, Ryan Preece going up in the air, flipping at Daytona for the second time in his career, which those crashes, I'll get into it. So the crashes that look the scariest aren't always the most dangerous, and here's why. So you think about crashes where a car is flipping up in the air. It looks incredibly violent. However, those aren't usually the scariest crashes. When a car is up in the air and flipping, it's losing energy. So its end result, when it comes down and crashes into the track or the ground, it's actually hitting with a slightly gentler force. There's not as much force, not as much impact coming onto the driver themselves. So those wrecks look very, obviously spectacular, flipping up in the air, but they're not actually quite as dangerous as they look. And that, important to notice, is today is the anniversary of the accident that took the life of the great Dale Earnhardt.
Yeah.
His accident, you talked about in the Daytona 500, his accident was one that, quote unquote, didn't look as bad as his car just went up into the outside wall, whereas there had been a wreck earlier in that race involving Hall of Famer Tony Stewart where his car flipped up in the air several times over and over. Tony was mostly uninjured in that accident, and that really speaks to the fact that those crashes aren't quite as dangerous. But moving on to the wrecks in this race, of course, Ryan Preece's flip, but you also had the big one near the end of the race. Joey Logano with how I would describe it as some terribly irresponsible driving. God. I mean, it was, if you want to get into it, Brock, about the crash that Logano, so for context, Logano tried to split the middle between, it was Ricky Stenhouse Jr. On the outside, and I believe it may have been Ryan Blaney on the inside, but I'm not 100% sure. He tried to split the middle, way too overly aggressive, and ends up crashing a third of the field.
That was just, admittedly, that was probably the worst driving I ever seen. And I've been to New York City like a bunch of times, and that was probably the worst driving I ever seen. And it was just more or less like the way he was doing it. It was just like you're trying to like thread the needle, and it was the way. And Joey Logano himself, he can be a little bit of, you said earlier, a spoiled little brat.
Well, he has all the hallmark makings of a young man who is very entitled and has been for a long time, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and it's the way that the crashes happened was with like the entire circumstances that happened. I really hope that everybody involved is happy, except for Joey. You caused an entire thing on itself, and you just need to get punished for it. Maybe just a dodgeball match with me and Sky Zone, but that's another thing on itself. But that's my take or two.
And I did re-watch the replay of the crash. So as Logano was trying to split the middle between Stenhouse on his outside and Blaney on his inside, he's also colliding doors with Kyle Busch down to the inside of him and ends up crashing several cars, which is 15 laps to go. It's a level of irresponsible driving that is not too unfamiliar territory for the number 22 car. Joey Logano, a two-time Daytona 500 champion, and in this wreck, he takes out Ryan Blaney, who's never won the Daytona 500. He takes out Kyle Busch, who is now 0 for 21 in the Daytona 500. He takes out my personal favorite driver, Chase Elliott, who has also never won the Daytona 500. So, and then William Byron, Elliott's teammate, goes to win his second straight Great American Race. Byron, rather, I personally wish Elliott had won it.
Yeah.
Byron is the first racer to win back-to-back Daytona 500s since Denny Hamlin did it in 2019 and 2020. Hamlin, of course, a three-time winner of the race, nearly won it a fourth, and then was pushed out of the way on the final lap. But Brock, an interesting race, and really, I would say, a good one overall.
Yeah, it was very intense, especially with the rain delay, and it was very, close enough. Rhetoric almost had some stuff, but Byron just was very, it was like a close call, but it was very close.
Yeah, a lot of times in the Daytona 500, in races like this, a lot of times it's said that you can't plan a way to win this race. Your plan for this race, and for a lot of race teams, it is put yourself in contention to win the race, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen, because at tracks like Daytona and Talladega, they call them super speedways for a reason. They also call Atlanta a super speedway, which I think is ridiculous. I don't know why Atlanta's a super speedway. But at these tracks, the unpredictable is a guarantee on the last final laps, especially in the Daytona 500. And Byron did an excellent job, along with Tyler Reddick, who finishes second in this race. Byron did a terrific job of ensuring that he would put himself in a position to win, and he did.
Yeah, no, it was a great win. And, well, I just want to say I'm really glad that Kyle Busch didn't win as well. Kyle Busch is, I love to call him all the time, because George Bush, Kyle Busch. But at the same time, it was just... You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, so growing up, of course, myself, not a very big Kyle Busch fan either, so I was very okay with seeing him not win the Daytona 500 for a 21st consecutive year. I also want to talk about another one of my favorite drivers when I was a kid, Jimmie Johnson, running for a lower level team. Of course, Johnson retiring from Cup Series action several years ago. But Jimmie Johnson finished third in this race in a car that Jimmie Johnson started in 39th place and ends up finishing third.
Jimmie Johnson, that was a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yes, he finished third on Sunday.
I was surprised when I saw that. That was hilarious.
Yes, Jimmie Johnson racing in a number 84 Toyota, which... Growing up as a Jimmie Johnson fan, seeing him in anything but the number 48 Lowe's Chevrolet makes me a little sick, but it was bizarre to see Johnson puts together a third place finish. The final top 10 scoring order, Byron with the win, Tyler Reddick second, Jimmie Johnson third, Chase Briscoe, the pole sitter, finishes in fourth in his first race for Joe Gibbs Racing in the number 19 car. John Hunter Nemechek finishes fifth. A lot of names that you would not typically expect, a lot of that because of the crash. Alex Bowman finishes sixth. Ryan Blaney seventh. Austin Cindric eighth. Denny Hamlin ninth. And Cole Custer finishing in 10th, rounding out your top 10. A good mix of manufacturers as well. Byron winning it in a Rick Hendrick Chevrolet. A bit of a surprise to see Kyle Larson not really too much of a factor in this race either, as of course Larson has dominated the Cup Series the last few years. So we'll see how that translates into a season. The Daytona 500 is, they call it the Super Bowl of stock car racing, and it's always interesting to see how will the Daytona 500 winner parlay the start of the year to the rest of the year.
Yes, and It's usually a tough choice with like all of that, like because last year it was like a mixed bag all over the place. But for this year, I really do have a high chance about Byron just clearing everything out. How about you?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, realistically, any Rick Hendrick Chevrolet, and perhaps I say this with a little bit of bias, but any Rick Hendrick Chevrolet always has a good chance to compete for a championship. Obviously, those four being Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, William Byron, and Alex Bowman. Those four are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Joe Gibbs Racing is a team that has really kind of fallen off a little bit. I mean, obviously, they don't have Kyle Busch anymore. They don't have Martin Truex Jr. anymore, as he's only going to be running on a very part-time schedule. They have Chase Briscoe, who did finish 4th in the 19 car. In my view, Joe Gibbs Racing is going to be entirely carried by the success of Denny Hamlin. That's at least how I feel about it. And you talk about 23XI Racing, the team, of course, jointly owned by Hamlin and Michael Jordan, between Tyler Reddick in the 45 car, who did finish 2nd in this race, and Bubba Wallace in the 23 car. They're going to be a factor, and obviously don't count out the 3 Penske cars. You have Austin Cindric in the 2, Ryan Blaney in the 12, and Joey Logano in the 22. I would be shocked if the champion at the end, I really, honestly, I would be shocked if the Cup Series champion at the end of the year came from any team other than Penske or Hendrick.
I do can see that, even with my prediction, but I just think like what Byron did in the race would probably translate well. But yeah, I do see common ground with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'll definitely be interesting to watch as the NASCAR Cup Series season is now underway. So thanks for joining me, Brock. Always good to talk some NASCAR with you. Always a big fan of it.
Yep.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, Jenna Polito will join me to talk about some NHL action. I'm Matt Volz, and you're watching Sports Hour on WNYF.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
We've been down there. You gotta do the same. Post office. All you do is sign. So don't get nervous. Sign your name. Selective service. It takes no time. Just sign on the line at the post office. Selective service.
Hey guys, if you're about to turn 18, you've got to register with Selective Service. It's simple. Just go down to the post office, fill out a card, and turn it in. That's all there is to it. There's no draft now. You're just adding your name to Selective Service's list in case there's a national emergency.
So if you're 18 now, Selective Service, you gotta get down to the post office.
Register with Selective Service. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the law.
Takes no time. Just sign on the line at the post office. Selective Service.
Welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm now joined by Jenna Polito. We're going to talk about the NHL. Jenna in a full Sabres goat head outfit tonight.
Yes, I think I got this from a Queen City Vintage Buffalo Represent.
I love them. I
so good.
have been meaning to shop there for so long, and I have not gone there.
I actually I got a Fredonia sweatshirt from them, and
Really?
they gave me a student discount. I was like, do you offer student discounts? And I showed them my card.
I would absolutely love to go there. So in the NHL, of course, on a pause right now for the Four Nations face-off, which looking forward to Thursday night's championship game between the U.S. and Canada. That was a heck of a first game between those two nations.
It's always a treat when USA plays Canada. I believe in the game on Saturday, the face-off happened, and there were about 9 seconds of hockey played, and 3 fights occurred within that. I don't know if I remember correctly, but it was one of the Tkachuk brothers who started the fight with Brandon Hagel, and then that all happened, and then the second Tkachuk brother also followed suit, and that all happened, and I could see him like slamming on the glass in the penalty box and everything. They were so excited.
Oh, the way the two of them were in the box too was absolutely hilarious. You get one of them that goes in the box, and the other one comes in. I couldn't remember who got in a fight first, and then they're in there sitting in the penalty box after getting in a full-on hockey fight with another NHL player, and they're sitting there just like brothers. How'd I look out there? I look pretty good? Yeah, I look pretty good. Threw a couple of good punches. It's the passion, the way that every player has taken this so seriously. That was one of the main things that I wondered about at the start of this tournament. You thought about how seriously are the players going to take this? Is it going to be like we're just kind of lightly playing back and forth? It's been intense, Jenna.
It's been insanely intense, and I believe for the championship game on Thursday, it was actually Sidney Crosby and one of his teammates for Team Canada. They braved a snowstorm to make it to practice because this is just how dedicated they are. I mean, I'm sure in Boston, which is where the championship will be held, you know, the Bruins probably do that all the time as well, but it just really shows how they're not just taking this lightly. This is a big deal, and I would say this is probably a bigger deal than the All-Star game has been in the past for some of these players.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, we hinted at it earlier in our NBA segment when Jack was on with me, but the NHL got rid of their All-Star game to do this Four Nations tournament, and I think it's been a huge success. I mean, you had obviously the first USA-Canada game, but the others have been terrific. The Canada-Finland game the other day was great, and you've gotten to see some players play to represent their country and take it so seriously like that. I've found it crazy to watch Rasmus Dahlin play with competent hockey players for the first time in his NHL career. That was definitely really neat to watch, even though Sweden isn't playing for a championship in this tournament. But the rest of the Four Nations tournament, outside of just the U.S. and Canada, you've had Finland,
yes,
and you've had Sweden, and I think it's been a phenomenal tournament. I wonder if this is something that they're going to look to do every year.
I really hope so. I mean, I've had a great time watching these games. I definitely think it's also more interesting, kind of hinting back to what Jack said previously in this. I mean, especially if we're going to give these players that are not in All-Star games a break, like for that week off, it only seems like we should do something else for that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like you were saying with Rasmus Dahlin, this is the Sabres effect, as we have seen in so many different things. I mean, Jack Eichel is playing for the USA team as well because he has played some of the best hockey of his career. Sam Reinhart is playing for the Canada team. And yeah, I don't know. It's not fun to think about, but...
No. Well, the Sabres do have some players who are on international teams. Obviously, we mentioned Dahlin for Team Sweden. We do have two players on the Finnish team as well, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen backing up Jussi Saros, and Henri Jokiharju playing in an international tournament
I believe
for some reason.
Henri Jokiharju had the only game in the USA-Finland
yes,
game
he did,
where it was 6-1 USA, so...
Yes, Henri Jokiharju scoring a goal in a hockey tournament that featured other NHL players.
Who would have thought?
How about that,
Who would
Jenna?
have thought?
That's, you know, if you had Henri Jokiharju scoring a goal, period, in 2025 on your bingo card, I give you a heck of a lot of credit for that. So pivoting towards the Sabres, there are some potential names on the trade block. We talked about it last week as well with Dylan Cozens. Cozens, of course, being paid $7 million a year. He's expected to fill the Sabres' second-line role, and he struggled in that role this season. Now, Jenna, I don't know about you. I'm wondering if Cozens might be a player who could potentially benefit from a change of scenery.
I think definitely Cozens is the type of player that could benefit from this. While it is unclear whether Kevyn Adams is currently shopping around for Cozens, I mean, I don't really know if they would want to let him go, and free up that cap space, but there has been talk about moving him to Calgary, which would be interesting, seeing as Calgary itself does not have much capital or much to trade, so they may not be willing to get Dylan Cozens, who, I mean, he's 23 years old. He's a good candidate to really develop his hockey. And again, like we've seen so many other times before, once a player leaves Buffalo, it kind of seems like we see them to flourish and really play some awesome hockey. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Eichel, Reinhart, Brandon Hagel, who wasn't even given an entry-level contract in an all-time genius move by former general manager Jason Botterill, who was somehow allowed to hold an executive position in the NHL ever again after his tenure with the Sabres. And it goes beyond just those players. I mean, you look at Brandon Montour in Florida. How many players did the Panthers have that were former Sabres?
Also, I would point to Rasmus Ristolainen, who I remember vividly. He was never a great defenseman, but he was one of my favorite players on the Sabres. But, you know, he was not that good, but he really seems to fit into kind of the groove of the Philadelphia Flyers, and we've seen him get a lot better. And again, Sabres effect.
That's right. One of my all-time hockey videos that I've ever seen. I don't know, this is very specific, Jenna, but I think it was in the 2019 season. It was the 50th anniversary season when Rasmus Ristolainen skated full speed into the boards, and the boards checked him onto the ground. It's one of the funniest videos I've ever seen in my life. Please go on YouTube and find the video of Rasmus Dahlin getting hit by the boards. No, I didn't misspeak. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But you're exactly right. This Sabres effect, is that going to cause a problem with the Sabres trying to trade players too? Are they going to be scared to trade players because of how they might play with other teams?
Honestly, I kind of see that. Again, if we're talking about this effect with players getting better as they go to other teams, I'm not sure if the management and Kevin Adams has kind of understood that and see that. Another thing that has been talked about a lot and has been eyed a lot is Alex Tuch. The LA Kings are currently looking at Tuch, which honestly, it would probably be a great addition to their team. I think they're looking to get Jordan Spence from them, who's a defenseman, another young guy, you know, not doing terrible. He's got like 17 points on the season, so it would be roughly about an equal trade in my opinion, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Sabres would probably have a very difficult time trading Tuch because of his connection to Buffalo, the fact that he grew up just outside of Syracuse, grew up as a Sabres fan. You know, if the Sabres are going to make a deal, at least my prediction for them, if they're going to make a trade, don't expect it to be anything crazy. I mean, we already saw that the Vancouver Canucks took Elias Pettersson off of their trade block after trading JT Miller to the Rangers. I really wouldn't expect, I mean, you look at TSN's trade bait list, it's really not all that impressive. So if the Sabres do actually do anything at the trade deadline, which I don't know that I trust Kevin Adams to do, I don't know that it's going to be some sort of crazy move with all this razzle-dazzle and hype around it, Jenna.
Yeah, I mean, the trade deadline this year for the NHL is pretty late. It is March 8th. And I don't really think Kevin Adams will make any sort of trades mid-season. I do know that he would definitely want to keep Jason Zucker and Jordan Greenway. They're both unrestricted free agents. But the rest is kind of up in the air, I guess. I did also see on that trade bait list one of the only players on this, Bowen Byram, which, in my opinion, that was probably the best trade that Kevin Adams has made in his career. Casey Mittelstadt to the Avalanche for Bowen Byram, but I wouldn't want to see that guy go.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, when they brought in Byram and traded Casey Mittelstadt to Colorado, that was sort of thought the core of their defense was going to be Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, and Bo Byram. It might be tricky to retain all three of those, especially because they're all left-hand shot defensemen, even though Dahlin can play absolutely anywhere you put him. Byram was a name that was potentially tossed out there to be packaged with Cozens in a deal for Elias Pettersson. Now, obviously we know now that's not happening, more than likely. So Byram could be on the move. Like you said, he does have RFA status, so it'll be interesting to see, will the Sabres hang on to Byram, or will they try and float him and make some sort of trade happen? Byram's numbers pretty good when he's with Dahlin, not so much outside of Dahlin. I think that speaks more to the Sabres' lack of defensive depth than it does to Byram individually, though.
Speaking of the defensemen, real quickly, I saw Paul Hamilton, who is a writer for the NHL. He said he'd trade Dahlin for Brady Tkachuk, which I don't know if I agree with that one, but.
And that's an excellent note to end on. And
to chew on.
I'm honestly at a loss for words for the level of short-sightedness that goes into a possible thought like that, and these are instances where we should probably think about things before we say them out loud. So thanks for being alongside for this NHL segment. I'll be back in a few moments. Lily Howard will join me to talk about the National Lacrosse League. I'm Matt Volz, and you're watching Sports Hour on WNYF.
When you think of the local lowdown, what do you think of?
Well, when I think of the local lowdown, it's the live music that we have played in the studio.
It's got to be the laughs we shared, the memorable moments during the whole thing. Oh my God, so fun.
The local lowdown for me is the people behind the scenes, the amazing team that we have making the show.
Oh, it's got to be exploring all sorts of genres and music I've never heard before.
Oh, easy. Going out to shows and talking to artists and getting the latest news on what they have planned for the future.
It's about these artists, man. Giving them a platform to showcase what they've worked so hard on and show their music to the community. It's all about supporting the local scene of music to keep it running for years to come. And of course, the band merch. You can't forget about the merch.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Welcome back to Sports Hour on WNYF. I'm now joined by Lily Howard. We're going to talk about the National Lacrosse League. Unfortunately, Lily, not able to talk about the undefeated Bandits anymore, as Buffalo took home their first loss of the season on Saturday night in a game that we were both at.
And game
at home.
Both at Marvel Night against the San Diego Seals. I would just like to say that I did say that they were going to beat the Rock, and
yes,
yeah, I did say that they were going to maybe not beat the Seals, but they were going to beat the Rock. So I'm very happy about that. But both of these games were pretty ugly to watch. Like, these were some nail biters, especially against the Rock. 13-12 win in regular time. We'll take it. That's cool. But one thing that I would like to say about this game, where was Josh Byrne?
For starters, that game, you have the Bandits going down 5-0 in the first quarter, which is a very uncharacteristic thing to see from Buffalo. Sometimes they have slow starts, but usually we're used to seeing the Bandits getting off to a good start. They fall behind 5-0, and you're right, Lily, really not much of anything from Josh Byrne in that game, and he's an offensive star. You would expect to put together some offense. The Bandits were able to get the win. Of course, not the same case on Saturday.
Unfortunately, no. But I don't know. it was so weird. I think that Johnny Tavares said it best. There was an interview with him after the game, and he said this team is just way too good to be, counting this loss as we're too tired, they're too worn out from this game. Like, no, this team has so much talent. I don't know what it was, other than the refs wearing their Seals jerseys the entire game. That was one of the worst officiated games I have ever seen in my entire life.
It's frustrating when you go to overtime and you have multiple calls. You had the one where one of the Bandits, I can't remember who exactly it was, is standing in front of the San Diego net, and San Diego's netminder totally takes a flop dive backwards. No embellishment penalty called? Looking around for it? Nothing called. Not to mention, one of the Seals in the end, right down by my seats, one of the Seals, it is a rule that you cannot play the ball if your helmet falls off. Helmet comes off. He takes 3 or 4 or 5 steps with the ball still in his stick. Penalty? Nope. And the Seals win in overtime.
Yep, it was awful, just awful. It was just such an upsetting game to sit there and just have to watch because, I mean, the pressure was really on. It was, obviously undefeated team. Where the league hates us. The comment sections on Instagram through the NLL pages, like after the Bandits lost, oh my gosh, just flooded with people. Don't even watch sports, being like, I'm just here for like the crying Bandits fans. I'm like, get a real problem, get a winning team then, hello. But like, it was so sad just to see them lose at home. But I was talking with my mom after the game. We were both saying the pressure is off now. Now they've already lost one. We kind of figured they weren't going to go undefeated, but it still hurts. And something that I am really wondering, these past 2 games, Tehoka Nanticoke has been really quiet. And I want to know what's going on with him, because
yeah. I mean, you have your scoring that comes from Josh Byrne and Dane Smith, but you also have, like we talked about last week, the depth on this team between Kyle Buchanan, Chris Cloutier, Chase Frazier. Tehoka Nanticoke is one who's right in the mix with them. And you're right, Lily, we really haven't seen a lot of offense from him yet this season, but specifically the last couple of games. Nanticoke is a player who the Bandits really depend on for that secondary scoring, and he's one who's going to have to get it going. The Bandits last year, of course, had a midseason slump. They fell to the number 4 spot. Still able to win the championship, of course, last year, but you would expect more from one of your better secondary scorers.
Right. It's just, I don't know what's going on. I'm really hoping that he gets it figured out soon, because we're also now down a player with Matt Spanger being out on the long-term IR. I didn't even get to see what happened. All I saw, I'm looking around like I lost the ball somewhere. The whole game is just insane. And he fell like right in front of my section. And I just looked down and I'm like, who is that? And I'm like, it's Matt Spanger. And Matt Spanger, he does have a tendency to get injured a lot, which is kind of whatever. We'll be fine without him, but it's just it stinks to see that he's gone again for another remainder of a season. Yeah,
it's tough, and it's a blow to a Bandits defensive core that really, at least on Saturday, didn't look all that great against San Diego. So you wonder, last year when the Bandits were struggling a little bit defensively, they made a couple of moves. Of course, you had, at the end of the 2023 season, Max Adler, their faceoff specialist, retires. They tried Ian McKay at the faceoff dot and were getting absolutely smoked. So they signed Connor Farrell, who scored his first career goal on Saturday, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Connor Farrell scores his first career goal. He was brought in last year as a faceoff man, and he did a great job. Then the Bandits also made a move acquiring the veteran Paul Dawson, who really did wonders for their defensive core. So you wonder if with Spanger out long-term, the Bandits might look to add to their defensive core.
That would be great. I would love it. Let's just keep building. Building. Come on. I just want to show all of these Toronto fans or the San Diego Seal fans or Albany fans, literally anybody, that this is a team that is like a force to be reckoned with, and we're going for that three-peat.
That's right. I mentioned after the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl, and I mentioned on Sports Hour last week that there's only going to be one three-peat that's taking place, and that 100%. Is going to be the Bandits winning a 3rd straight NLL Cup. At least we can hope. They're off for a little bit. They've got a while before their next home game. They're not home until, March 8th?
Something like that.
I believe is their next home game as they take on Calgary.
Next week. Which is scaring me just a little bit.
Right, given how the game went over the weekend, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then they're in Saskatchewan.
which is going to be a matchup between the top two teams
Right.
in the league. Saskatchewan 6-2 going into last weekend.
Yeah, and then we're back on the 8th against Calgary. Which is, that's a long time. We need that home field advantage. Like, come on now.
Yes, the hope is that they can get Banditland to be a factor in the playoffs. I'm not too overly worried. So, at least my take on the game on Saturday, officiating, frustrating. I also was disappointed in the offense. I thought you go to overtime. It reminded me of the playoff game last year, the quarterfinal game against Georgia. They went to overtime. Neither team could score for several minutes before Josh Byrne eventually scored the winner. The offense had about 6 minutes to score. They couldn't come up with anything. San Diego gets the winner. Also,
they had some good shots too.
They did.
Kyle Buchanan, like he was on fire that whole night.
Yes.
Like I can't believe we couldn't manage to get one in that amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, I don't think it was a bad game played by Buffalo. I think that losses are inevitable. Overall, big picture, you look at the season, they're 7-1, and their one loss was in overtime in a game that they trailed 4-0, and a game where they had played the night before on the road, going up to Mississauga, because the Rock would not be able to fill up an NHL-sized arena like the Bandits can. Must be some sort of skill issue for them. But the Bandits, looking forward, you're 7-1. I don't think you have a whole lot to worry about long term. Now, if the next few games they're falling behind in the first quarter like they did this weekend, if we see ourselves watching the Bandits slip to 7-3, 7-4, then maybe there's a problem. I think for right now, 7-1, you're good with that, especially since they're still in first in the league.
Right. I'm really hoping that they figure out whatever they've got going on about this whole first quarter thing. Because normally it's the third quarter, they kind of choke up a little bit, and you're like, okay, it's fine. You guys have played a solid first half, whatever. We'll give the other team just a little bit of wiggle room to come back. The first quarter, when you're starting your game out down by 5 to some of the worst teams in the league, that's scary. And we're going up against, like, right now, the standings are top 3. It's the Buffalo Bandits, Saskatchewan Rush, and the Calgary Roughnecks. Those are our next 2 teams that are playing. Like, we can't afford to do that. So I'm really hoping that they figure out whatever's going on. Tehoka gets his stuff figured out. Why am I about to say Johnny Tavares? Well, I guess Johnny Tavares, he comes out here, he gives them a good old pep talk. We get another Connor Farrell, couple goals, whatever, which that was electric, by the way.
Genuinely, I can't remember exactly what I had texted, but I texted a friend of mine. I said, the Buffalo Sabres could score a playoff overtime goal to win a series, and the building might not get as loud as it just did when he scored.
Completely agreed. Everybody was on their feet. The center was shaking. Like, it was crazy. My brother is a huge Connor Farrell fan, and I texted him. I was like, I wish you were here, because he was supposed to be at the game. It was fine. He'll see more, because he's going to show up, and we're going to get more Connor Farrell goals. But, yeah, he needs some milk. For sure.
It was. I did. So when Farrell scored that goal, I jumped up in the air, jumped out of my seat, and as I was coming back down, I absolutely crushed my knee off of the seat in front of me. I was sitting there holding my knee for about the next 10 minutes of game action, but
worth it.
Absolutely worth it. I do wish they would have come away with a win. It was my girlfriend's first Bandits game ever, which was very exciting. So, wish they could have come away with a win, but
then
a little bit short.
Her experience can only get better from here, though.
That is true.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it could get worse. But no, because it's not going to get worse, because we're going to win. We're going to go the rest of the season with 1 loss.
That's exactly right.
And a championship win. That's it.
That's exactly right. And in between segments earlier, before the NBA segment, Jack asked me, how frustrating would it be if the Bandits ended the season with just that 1 loss? Which, frustrating, but if you finish here with 1 loss, that'd be pretty incredible, too.
Yeah, I mean, really not bad. Like you said, losses are inevitable. But, I mean, hey, for the rest of the season, if we only have 1 loss and it's like a fluke and it's from an overtime loss,
yeah,
I'm happy. I'm good.
Absolutely. The confidence that Bandits fans have is something incredible and something that Buffalo's probably not really used to either. I mean, from a Bandits fan myself, I go into the arena every single game fully confident that the team is going to win. It was actually a surprising, weird feeling walking out of the arena on Saturday with a loss. Now, I am more than used to walking out of KeyBank Center after a loss. That was my entire childhood, pretty much. But to do that for the Bandits was a little bit weird. So maybe things can turn around. Usually with Banditland, there's all this sort of excitement, and usually they win. But
yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I remember I went to the game with my dad, and we were walking out, and I said to him, I was like, I don't remember the last time I walked out of here with a Bandits loss. Like, Sabres, yeah, absolutely.
Happens pretty much almost every time. Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, it's really sad. And our camerawoman Cam just reminded me of something. We have a jersey that we have worn, and every game that we've worn it to, they've won. And I was wearing the jersey the game that they lost.
Oh, so the magic is broken with the jersey, I
and
guess.
It's a Mark Steenhouse jersey.
Yeah, it's a great jersey.
There's a huge lore behind it. We don't have enough time left in the episode to go into it, but maybe someday. Maybe someday.
That's true.
I mean, it's just I don't think the magic is lost, because I've worn it before and they've won, but it was a heartbreaking loss for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a tough loss, but it's also the sort of thing that can fuel you. I mean, it's happened to the Bills before where they've had brutal losses towards the end of their season, and they've powered forward. The Bandits are not even halfway there. They'll hit the halfway point with their next game, but this is a team that, again, you look at big picture, they're 7-1, still in first place in the league. They've got some tough opponents ahead, of course, and going on the road, but they've shown that they can win there. They haven't lost a road game yet this season, knock on wood. We'll see how it goes in their next couple of games. But I think the Bandits have the opportunity. If you can get through this tough stretch of games, you could put yourself in a situation where no matter what happens, you're playing at home in the playoffs.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I think even just going into San Diego now, they're going to be mad, they're going to be hungry, they're going to be ready to take them down. Hopefully we can get a W. I would love to talk about just a win coming on next week, but we'll have to see. It's going to be a tough game for sure. Tough competition, but I think we've got it.
Absolutely. I mean, San Diego, of course, they lost one of their top players, Austin Stotts, at the beginning of the season, but they're still a very tough team, and we'll see how the Bandits do as they head out west. Well, thanks for joining me, Lily. Always great to talk about the Bandits, even after a loss. And thanks to everyone for tuning in at home. We'll catch you next week. I'm Matt Voltz, and you've been watching Sports Hour on WNYF.